At $200, a Super Nintendo setup costs twice as much as the old system. For the money, the company promises better pictures, sound, and adventure. Now you're playing with power, superpower. You're the king, I tell you! The king!
Only for Super NES. Only on Super NES. You're listening to the SNES podcast with your host, Soul Blazer.
Hello, folks. This is Super NES podcast, episode number 197. I am Greg. He is Joe.
Hello.
And we're coming at you today to talk about a number of games, actually, which we decided kind of would fit together very neatly, like one podcast. Just so we can just cover all of them at once and give them the proper treatment that they deserve. We're looking at today all the Street Fighter 2 games that got ported to the Super NES, which is a total of 4 of them. So, just real quick here for summary purposes, you have Street Fighter 2. The original one, aka the World Warrior for 1992, Street Fighter 2 Turbo Hyper Fighting for 1993, Super Street Fighter 2, The New Challengers 1984, and then finally Street Fighter Alpha 2 for 1996. Now I'm just going to say now, I'm sure I'm going to mess up the names again at some point during the course of this podcast because these names are like Teflon, and Capcom does the most absurd, silly things with these names of the series. It's like Super Street Hyper Alpha 2X whatever the heck. So it's like don't even start out the names of this franchise like they're nuts. But so anyway, this was actually Joe's original idea. I was just the one to expand upon it because Joe, you wanted to cover primarily your favorite game was it
Street Fighter Alpha 2.
Alpha 2, yes, right. Okay. So
which, a little backstory, one of the reasons I chose Street Fighter Alpha 2 is because I only discovered that there was a Super Nintendo version a month and a half ago. And I played it, and I was shocked, because I originally grew up with the Sega Saturn version, and the Sega Saturn version was amazing. I mean, it was almost like one to one for the arcade.
Yeah.
And you'll find out, but this Super Nintendo port is quite impressive.
Yeah, well, I think Total essentially didn't hear about it because A, there was a late release. Like I just said, it was 96, so
right.
That was toward the tail end of the Super NES. And B, B, based on these prices, it didn't get a big print run. So because of the four Street Fighter games, this was the most expensive game to find on eBay. So combination of those reasons. So. But anyway, we have covered, for long-time listeners of the podcast, we have covered the original games, Street Fighter 2, The World Warrior, way back when, years and years ago. So because of that, we're not going to go into any kind of major technical details about the game and the series. If you want to hear about the development or the developer, learn more about Capcom or anything else about the game, I do recommend checking out that podcast. We will talk about it a little bit, but just a heads up, it's not going to be our main focus here, for this one, because we have covered before in the past. But so I've already talked about my history with Street Fighter games, in this franchise. Joe just mentioned that he was really a big fan of the Alpha game. What's your overall history of the history as far as the Street Fighter series goes, Joe?
Okay, so it would have been 1992, I think, is when Street Fighter 2 came out.
91.
91. So it would have been 92 probably when I first really saw the machine. There wasn't many arcades in the Rhode Island area. There used to be DJ's Arcade in Warwick, and then I remember there was one tiny one in the North Kingstown area that, I lived in. And I remember at some point I walked into one of those arcades and I came across Street Fighter 2. It wasn't Super Street Fighter 2. It was Street Fighter 2. And as far as fighting games go, I can't remember any real fighting games before, only after. So for me, like, the genesis for fighting games is Street Fighter 2. And that experience in the arcade was amazing. And then, of course, that was followed up with Mortal Kombat, and that starts a whole new thing.
Yep.
But, like, Street Fighter 2 was so ingrained in me, in that arcade experience, that I remember, other than getting Mortal Kombat 2 from my Sega Genesis, the other game that I absolutely needed to have was Street Fighter 2 Championship Edition. And it was actually the reason I ended up getting a 6-button controller. Because I did get the game for my birthday, and that was amazing, but only 3 buttons. So you had to hit start every time you wanted to either, punch or kick. So if you hit start, like, it would start off, it was all punches, low, medium, and fierce. And then you'd have to hit start, and then it would switch the punches to kicks. And it was so convoluted. So, like, I praise them for, having the foresight to know, one, that they were going to have to make a new controller. And two, that, thankfully the start button isn't that far away from those 3 buttons. So with practice and time, it can get better. But yeah, once I got that 6-button controller, oh my God, Street Fighter 2 was my jam. Oh my God, I love that game. And then, of course, Super Street Fighter 2 came out, and that game got even more gameplay from me than the original. And then I can't think of anything else Street Fighter related that was released on the Genesis, at least that I owned. And then my next experience was when I got my Saturn. Eventually I was able to get, I think first I had the Street Fighter Collection. I think that came out first. Don't quote me on that. And then I got Alpha 2, and oh man, Alpha 2 was amazing. And it's cool, like, I'm not gonna, spoil it because we're gonna talk more about it, but, and since then, just like, I love Street Fighter. I love Mortal Kombat. Like, Mortal Kombat is like, Mortal Kombat's my wife. So I would marry Mortal Kombat, and I am a diehard fan of Mortal Kombat. I love Mortal Kombat, but Street Fighter is my mistress, and I see her very often. And then occasionally I dabble in some, Soul Calibur or Tekken, or, with the Saturn, that started my love for the Virtua Fighter series. Yeah. So, like, I started off with Street Fighter, and then that opened up an entire new world for me. And since then, I've, recently gotten into, like, Smash Brothers, which I had totally avoided and ignored from the N64 all the way up to the Switch. And it was getting it on the Switch where I was like, oh, this is actually pretty fun. And, like, I like that I have to actually learn all these characters to be able to go unlock more characters and everything else. So yeah, that's a long, convoluted version of my history.
No, you're fine. Yeah. Yeah, I'll just say real quick, in terms of summary, like, from, like, new listeners, I'm not the biggest fighting game fan, mostly because I've never really have been good with, like, trying to memorize, like, all the combos necessary. But Street Fighter, but yeah, the Street Fighter games I've enjoyed a lot, because I think that at least the early ones, you could at least have some success in them without having to learn too many combos. But so the newer ones, forget about it. Those are much more complicated. But at least the older ones were like a bit were easier for a newbie to pick up. So
I would agree with you. So a lot of players prefer the slow, methodical versions of Street Fighter 2 and the Super Street Fighters and stuff like that. But Alpha really sped up the competition and introduced combos and such like that. Air blocking, which was amazing. You could finally shoot Hadoukens from the air. That was another improvement with that series. And there are some people who prefer those games and that game style versus the original. Yeah. And I can see it from both camps, why you would like it or why you wouldn't, because Street Fighter Alpha lends to button mashers. If you are a button masher and you cannot remember combos or, half circles and whatever else, then alpha is your bag for sure. But if you are that slow, methodical person who is in your head thinking 4 or 5 moves ahead, like, oh, I'm going to fire a Hadouken, but also I'm going to do my, tornado kick soon after that, that Hadouken hits, like, that's your jam. You know what I mean? So,
right. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's nice that they're not only 2 different series, but they also play differently as well.
Yeah. For sure, I definitely agree with like most of that. So it's one of the point I wanted to make here, like what you just said before, and this also work like a good segue. There were fighting games out there before Street Fighter 2 like hit the arcades in 1991. It just that they just obviously Street Fighter 2 was a huge success because you do have the original Street Fighter from 1987. Like, don't forget that guy.
Right.
And you also have the series that was supposed to be a Street Fighter, the originally designed as Street Fighter sequel, but ended up being changed into something that was totally different. Final Fight, 1989. So
yeah.
But the original Street Fighter was not a very popular game. It did get home ports, but the original game was nowhere near as popular as Street Fighter 2 was.
Right.
And so I think they recognized that, and they went back to they really went back to the drawing board with Street Fighter 2 and just reinvent it, because Street Fighter 1 and 2 do not really have all that much in common if they make it down to it.
Yeah,
as far as the actual
very true.
As far as the actual gameplay goes.
They have Ryu and Sagat. That's it.
Well, and the basic premise, two guys beating one another like in a best 2 or 3 matches. But,
Right.
So, but a few of the a few of the moves were carried over as well too. So you did have the Hadouken for example. So
right.
So, and then Street Fighter. So there are. So as I mentioned before, there are numerous Street Fighter games mentioned. Roughly speaking, Street Fighter 2 games you can roughly categorize into 3 groups, if you will. The original, the original Street Fighter 2 games. Then you have the Alpha group, which started coming out in 1995, and then you have the X group, which started coming out in 1996. So, and then also you have the crossover games, which we're not even talk about here because it's that's a whole different kettle of fish.
Right.
Marvel vs. Capcom vs. SNK, etc., whatever. Street Fighter the movie as well too, but
yeah,
which actually not that bad of a game. I mean, as far as a fighting game goes, it's not bad. So
no, I mean, it gets a lot of crap for because the movie was kind of
yeah.
I won't even say the movie was crap because the movie was campy. That's what it was, and people expected a serious movie. But yeah, the game is fantastic in my opinion. It plays well. The only thing is that those digitized sprites do not age well. And you kind of see the same thing with Mortal Kombat, but Mortal Kombat at least has well animated backgrounds, so therefore, it kind of makes it still kind of cartoony, whereas Street Fighter the movie was they went all realistic and it just looks horrible.
Right. So, this is a franchise that's still very popular. It may not be as popular as it once was in the 90s, but it's still a very, popular franchise. I do have some limited sales figures here, which I'm going to talk about later on. But the most recent game in the franchise was Street Fighter V in 2016, which is pretty well received.
After the patches, yes.
But so, and then was it. So there was also the 30th anniversary collection, which came out in 2018 as well too. And currently, Street Fighter 6 is in development with the development with planned release date of next year sometime. So, and not a lot of information is available on that one yet. Except for the fact that very controversially that game's going to have in-game commentary, which is series first. So a lot of.
It's going to have in-game commentary. They already showed off 2 of the new characters, and it also looks like there may be a creative character suite, which is pretty cool.
That is interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
So, we'll have to see what happens with that game. I guess
this may be the next evolution in the Street Fighter games with the next game.
Sure. So, and yeah, you also mentioned They were able for the 60-button controller that you bought the Genesis.
Yes.
Capcom was signed a deal with Nintendo where the like Street Fighter 2 was like a Super NES exclusive like for a while. I think it was like 2 years was the it was within the contract, because it's like, which was a brilliant move of like Nintendo's part, because Street Fighter 2 was definitely the killer app for the system. Like,
so I think it's funny. So yeah, you're right. Like Capcom and Nintendo had an exclusive right to Street Fighter, the World Warriors, which was the original cabinet released.
Yes. Yep.
So Capcom released Championship Edition to add in Vega and Bison as playable characters. Because that game was different than World Warrior, that meant that they could license that to Sega exclusively, which is why you got technically the superior version on the Genesis versus the Super Nintendo, which I always found very interesting after the fact, because they kept it going. Like Nintendo was like, "Oh, you're releasing Hyper Edition? We want that now," And Hyper Edition became exclusive. So I mean, there's some petty stuff that was going on in those times, but also like, if you look at how the market was at that time, Nintendo and Sega were beating each other left and right, trying to get consumers. So it makes sense that they would try to get some sort of exclusivity, for whether it be for a certain amount of years or a specific type of the game. Right.
So, yep, no, definitely. So, but Street Fighter 2 was definitely like a great game for the Super NES to be able to sell. I forgot to confirm this, but I want to say off the top of my head that Street Fighter 2 was probably the second most sold. That's the second most sold game in the Super NES, right behind the Super Mario World. But,
I believe it. You can still get copies of Street Fighter 2 today. For like $5 on the Super NES. I think the most I've ever seen it is like $10. So they sold millions of those cartridges for sure.
Right. So the figures I have, are not limited to Super NES. Includes like all platforms.
Right.
But Street Fighter 2 sold about 15.5 million copies like worldwide. So
that makes perfect sense.
And Street Fighter by itself, for the whole franchise, has done about like 47 million copies like worldwide, too, since its release. So, but yeah, and like Street Fighter 2, it was an excellent conversion, like the arcade game too, like almost arcade perfect. I mean, like really so close to the arcade experience, but just the slight downgrades in graphics and music that you would expect to find on a 16-bit system. But really, the only flaws of the game, playing it now, given the podcast, the only flaws I have of the game are not are not the flaws of the game itself. I don't think that makes sense. It's just that Street Fighter 2 is it's a very like slow, sluggish game compared to like the newer Street Fighter games, and it also has a very like limited roster. It feels like.
Yes. So if you've evolved with the series, it is kind of hard to go back and play the original. I prefer nowadays to play Hyper. Fighting, just because it's a little bit faster and it's just faster enough to where I can enjoy it and I don't feel like, oh my god, like doing a Hadouken in Street Fighter 2 and watching that fireball slowly move across the screen, like it doesn't surprise me that the AI just jumps over it, like, you know what I mean? But when you're playing like Hyper Fighting and that's moving 3 times as fast, it's so satisfying to get that timing just right to where, like, even if they try to jump out of the way, they're going to get hit with it.
And it's not because of the port. The original arcade game is like slow too. Just like we just that's what I said. Like it's not the fault of the game itself. The game. The game is still fun. I mean, like, if this is the only Street Fighter game that you have in hand, you can still have a fun time with it.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I'm just saying, like, just that things have evolved a lot since then. So like, and like the biggest the biggest changes that Capcom made with the Alpha group of games was to have a bigger roster, more moves, like to have the game speed that go faster. So
the introduction of supers, the introduction of combos, the speed being ticked up, those were all huge steps forward. That it seems small now when we think about it.
Yeah.
But at the time, like, that was revolutionary.
Yes. So, like, I'm sure you probably played Street Fighter 2 quite a bit at friends' houses who had Super NESs back in the day, right?
No. Believe it or not, I actually had people come to my house to play the Genesis version.
Oh, okay, that's surprising. So,
Yeah, so
okay.
I had a couple friends who had a Super Nintendo growing up, and they had World Warriors. And one of the common complaints I always heard was, yes, graphically the game looks great. It plays just like it does in the arcade, but it doesn't have Vega and Bison. And back then, Bison was kind of a, fan favorite character. Because he could do his Psycho Crusher and like literally go fly up clear across the screen. And then he had this dirty, slide move, which he kept through the entire series, where you hit down and, high kick, and he just like glides.
Oh, yes.
And it's like a snowplow is the best way to explain it. It's like getting hit by a snowplow. Like, there's no way to get around it other than jumping over your opponent. And if you get hit by it, because it is a high kick move, it does quite a bit of damage. And if you know how to do things right, you can get that, that slide kick to get the opponent kind of kicked up into the air, and then be able to do that, hold back for 3 seconds, push it forward, and hit high punch, and be able to do the Psycho Crusher and just plow through your opponent. And it literally takes 50% of their life away just with those two moves. He is dirty. So, yes, I have played the Super NES version back in the day, but it was always, one of those, like, I'd have to be like, oh, can we, like, can we play Super Nintendo, like, the Street Fighter? And then it would always be like, well, I got Mortal Kombat, or we could play Mortal Kombat 2. And they'd always try to offer something else. And I understand why, but, like, at the same time, I'm like, come on. But then, they would always ask, hey, when we go to your house, can we play, like, Street Fighter 2? And I'd be like, okay. And I always gave them the 3-button controller so they could learn.
Right. Yeah, that 3-button controller just did not do very good for games like that.
No, definitely not. Believe me, like, I was happy I got that 6-button controller for my birthday, but, it was a long wait till Hanukkah to be able to pick up a second one.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. So who were your favorite character in Street Fighter 2, and did that change once you finding that change like as you got over to the Alpha games?
So Street Fighter 2 started off for me in the arcade, and when I first got it home, I loved Guile. Guile is...
He's my favorite too, yes.
He's super easy to control. He's got this wicked, like, high kick move that you can do where he, like, flips upside down and he, like, sweep kicks you, but he doesn't sweep kick you. He roundhouse kicks you in the face. All of his moves are charge moves. So it's a simple hold back for 3 seconds, push forward and hit the punch button. He'll do his little sonic boom, which I always loved in the arcade. And he was sonic boom. And then, he also had the, hold down for 3 seconds and then press up and kick. And he would do the little hurricane, like, flip kick thing. But as I experimented, with the different roster players, I soon started to fall in love with Bison. That's one reason why I know all of his dirty moves. Bison was fantastic. And, a lot of people would say it's cheating because you're playing with the boss character. But you will see a trend here. I'll tell you that right now. So I got to, get well with Bison, and he's never really changed through the series. Then I would get to, know Ken and Ryu, very well. Both of them played very similar. It's with the half circles and the punches to do the Hadouken. They do the, tornado uppercut. They got the tornado kick. And then with the Alpha series, I'm not even gonna lie. I started with Ryu, and I got good with Ryu. Bison was in that series as well. Again, same thing, because I had used him before. I was pretty good with him. But it was when I beat the game on the Sega Saturn, they unlock Akuma. and it's not just Akuma, it's Shin Akuma, which is like the evil version. And he's like super powerful, but he's got the same moves as like Ryu and Ken, so he can do the Hadouken, but he was the first one who could do air Hadoukens. And I got to learn how to play him, and that he has been my man ever since. If I play any of the new games, first thing I do is go, check out how Akuma is doing and see how he plays, and then it's always like Bison, and then I fall back to like, Ryu or Ken. But in like the most recent games, like it's all Akuma. Like I am all about Akuma, and I think it's just he's like a tortured soul who he's Ryu, but he's like an evil version of Ryu. So I don't know. Yeah,
I don't think I've ever like used him. But
he is unlockable in the Super Nintendo version, but it is complicated as all hell.
I believe I have here I think there's a cheat code you can use to unlock him. So.
Yeah, so you got to beat the game first, then you got to hold a bunch of buttons on like the second player controller or something like that. Then you got to like hold long press a couple buttons on the character select screen.
Yeah.
And then you got to like press select and start, and it's ridiculous. And thankfully nowadays there are patches out there that not only fix some of the shortcomings of the game, which we will discuss, but also they automatically include Shin Akuma, so there's that.
Okay. No, I definitely agree with you about Guile. Like I think Guile's like a very nice, well balanced, easy to play character like for beginners.
Yeah, absolutely.
So he's still like one of my favorites. What's that better of the game though? Actually, besides Guile, like I also really enjoyed using Chun-Li once I got better of the game because her speed I appreciate. Just her quickness and agility.
Yeah, I think her, E Honda, and Blanca, or Blanca, depends on how you pronounce it. Those three all have moves where like you have to rapidly press a button to be able to do one of their finishers. Chun-Li's got the kick, E Honda's got the Fist of Fury is what they call it, even though it just looks like he's trying to high five you. And then, Blanca's got the electricity that he gives off.
Yes, I hate that.
And, yes, everybody hates that. And then, he's got his half circle spin that he can do, which is also super annoying. So like, I think those three are the easiest to learn and to adapt with. Other than Guile, of course.
Yep.
And then it's just from there, it's like Balrog and Sagat are very slow, methodical. Balrog, I don't think, like, he really doesn't have any special moves. They say he does, but like all he does is like Fist of Fury and like things like that. Like he doesn't, he can only punch because he's a boxer. And I think they changed that in later iterations where like he kind of had some kicking stuff, but for the most part he stayed a puncher.
Yes,
but like and guys like Zangief, Zangief is huge, he's powerful. If he gets his hand on you, like close quarters with Zangief is like dangerous. Same thing with Blanca.
He's the one who does that whirlwind spin punch attack,
and
right? I hate that.
Yeah, and like if he grabs you and he does that pile driver special, like it's 25% of your life just gone. He's dirty, but also at the same time, like if you can learn to
games
play
also
him,
balance things out better. Thank God.
Yes,
because,
yes.
But so
yeah.
It's like, they don't have the same flaws that you just mentioned with him and with Vega earlier, like Street Fighter 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will mention some codes here, Street Fighter 2, like real quick here before we move on, because some of these codes, they're not really that practical for the game. They're just interesting. Like, there's one code, for example, Street Fighter 2, that if you want to remove everything, from the screen just to make the game run a hair faster. The energy bars, timer, and sound, you can do that. There's a code for that. So, you can also play the same character versus mode, which is nice. And you can also see the game statistics, if you want to see it. Which will tell you, how often something's been used. And just how many games have been played, just like it was last reset. So.
And it's crazy to think that you need a code for that when, that's, so standard in games now. It's not even funny.
Mm-hmm. Yep, yeah. So, and there's a bunch of glitches also in the game. Curiously enough, the vast majority of them involve God for some reason. So I don't know why, but you can also get you can also have the Chun-Li sound the end flame screen for all the characters if you want to. There's also get this, there is a 1 in 512 chance that the game will automatically perform an attack, block, or special for you. So
that's interesting.
It says it was programmed in to help new players,
right?
But the odds of coming up are so remote that it's like you could probably play a game thousands of times and not see it happen once.
I get it because with the D-pad, it's kind of hard to do those half circles. Sometimes you can't get that just right. But also, how frustrating does it have to be that you sat there for, we'll say, 5 minutes, trying through multiple matches to do a Hadouken or something like that, and you can't pull it off, and then suddenly the computer says, well, you know what, that's 1 in 512 chances, we'll do it for you. And then you get that false hope that you just pulled off the magic move that you've been practicing for God knows how long. And then you go into the next fight and realize that you can't do it. That's just wrong. I'm sorry.
So other secrets the game has, you can access a configuration screen, change the control configuration.
Oh.
There are extra endings available, for each of the characters. Extra sounds. You can see full character profiles on the characters the characters if you want to, and you can also refill your life bar like a Blanca, for trick. So, so the game actually has a lot of bugs, code, and secrets in it. It's one that I realized at the time. So I just wanted to mention that here.
Yeah.
Because the fact that even an old game shows new tricks to show you every now and then, I suppose.
Yeah.
So, moving on to moving on to the next game to get ported to the Super NES, Street Fighter 2 Turbo. Looking at my list real quick here, 2 Turbo appears it was if I'm counting correctly here, the 5th version of the game, because you have Street Fighter 2 World Warrior, Championship Edition, Hyper Fighting, Street Fighter 2 The New Challengers, and then came Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. So
Turbo Hyper Fighting.
Yeah. Like I said, these names are so freaking confusing, but
yeah. And I mean, this is just one of those things where I think this originated by someone hacking an original Street Fighter 2 board, and that somehow became popular in the arcades, and that's what led to them releasing the console version.
Yes.
From what I understand. I mean, other than obviously that whole, Sega's got Championship Edition and you're not getting it, Nintendo. That whole thing. But, this was a way for the SNES to get Championship Edition, just with the caveat of you have to play it really fast.
Well, actually, it was Hyper Fighting. So Hyper Fighting was taken into 2 console ports. The Super NES got Street Fighter 2 Turbo, and Flying Genesis got Street Fighter 2 Special Championship Edition.
Oh, okay.
Just to make things, just make things more confusing than they already are.
Right.
So, Hyper Fighting was, as you just mentioned, Joe. That was that was Capcom's official response to the bootleg editions of the game that were out there. So, most notably known for its faster gameplay, different character costumes, and new special techniques.
Specifically, Street Fighter Rainbow.
Yeah. So Street Fighter 2 plays very, very similar to Street Fighter the World Warrior, just the faster speed, and there are additional characters in this game. I think I actually could not find confirmation of that anywhere, but I want to say there's 2 extra characters in here.
Well, you get compared to the World Warriors, you get Bison and Vega.
Yep, that's what I'm thinking about. Okay,
yep.
All right. So,
they did, include a few extra stages, which is obviously Bison's stage and Vega's stage. But other than that, I mean, this is turned up to ×3, like I said, and there's really not much here other than it's faster, and I think you can agree with me.
Yep, it is. I never really played this version before. Like up to the podcast, yeah, but it's a very nice improvement. Improvement. I mean, it's not that much different than Street Fighter 2, but still like you, but even just the small upgrades still make for a fun game. Is it worth paying? Was it worth paying $50 for it back in the day? Like you already had the original game, probably not. But if you didn't get the game for whatever reason, this is a nice upgrade to it, I think. So.
See, that's proof right there that you're not a fan. Yes, it was totally worth the $50 for the upgrade. Because that's what Capcom still does today. They sell us Street Fighter 4, and then they release Street Fighter 4,
every game
expansion game, and then they say Street Fighter 4 Arcade Edition, then they go Street Fighter 4 Ultra Edition, then they go Street Fighter 4 Super Ultra Crazy Edition, and it includes everything that came before, and they keep doing it with every game. So, clearly the formula worked for them. They're still using it. I think they kind of caught on because Street Fighter 5 really just had upgrades. They didn't try to change the names or anything else. But definitely for 4, they were like, we're taking you for the ride.
Yeah. Which is one reason I think that Street Fighter 4 wasn't very well received. I've not heard too many people talk favorably about that game. So, but so like the past game, Street Fighter 2 Turbo and Super NES is loaded with cheats, and codes. Did you know for example, Joe, there was a way there's a way to make the game. There's a way to make the game even faster.
No, I didn't.
There's a Mega Turbo code. Yep. So,
just in case it's not fast enough.
You also can equalize the playing field if you want to. And this one's interesting. No special moves. So nobody can do any special moves. It's just like punch, kick, jump. That's it.
That's a button masher's dream right there.
Yeah. You can also for versus battles, you can also turn special skills on or off if you want to as well too.
Oh, okay.
So, you're able to get game posters, an extra ending in the game. You're able to finish a one-player game against a computer at level of difficulty while continuing. So good luck with that because that is a real brute. You can skip one-player matches if you want to, which is nice. Character profiles are also viewable in this game as well too. There's also like a versus. You're also able to select the same character in versus mode again if you want to. And there's also the so-called 5-star mode that you can also use, which is a kind of like an increased difficulty setting for you as well too. So,
jeez, if you do 5-star mode with the super mega hyper mode, oh my god, that you're asking for death.
Yeah, so, and you can also change the colors, change the controller configuration, things like that, as well too. And if you play the game, in the modern 30th anniversary, that isn't even right, 30th anniversary collection.
Yep.
But there are achievements that this game has, which as well too, if you played in one of the online versions of the game. Some of these achievements are pretty easy to get, win 10 times, fight out 12 opponents, some of these, however, are going to be a real brute to get, clear arcade mode without losing any rounds.
Yep.
Clear arcade mode without losing any matches. Mm-hmm. Win 30 times in ranked online matches. So, good luck with those. But so this is a nice improvement. So, and then Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo was the 5th arcade installment, which I guess new challengers kind of made a lot of improvements, but also slowed the game down a little bit. So Street Fighter 2 Turbo brought that speed back. And they also brought back they also introduced super combos, which we were talking about earlier, Joe.
Yeah.
This is the first appearance of those, and also Akuma makes his first appearance as well too. So, So this game got ported both to both Super NES and Genesis. Both versions of the game are pretty similar to one another, just minus the usual controller graphical differences. Again, I really didn't have experience with this one before, but again, it's like more of the same. But like again, just like there's improvements. Yes, the improvements are nice, but again, it's like unless you're a diehard fan, paying another $50 whatever to get this version of the game is like kind of stretching it a little bit, I think. But I do appreciate, however, like the super combos are nice. I suck at using them, honestly, but they're nice to have. It's a nice feature. So, but yeah, this this plays very well in the system, I think. So, you have any thoughts about like so do you have any thoughts about like this game, Joe?
I thought the introduction of the new characters, T-Hawk, Cammy, Fei Long, and I know there's another one that I'm completely missing. DJ. There we go. Those four were, great additions. Fei Long was really nice because even though they had slowed the game back down, because this is a more or less a direct sequel to Street Fighter 2, more than an improvement.
Yeah.
Fei Long kind of took that hyper fighting style and moved it over just as a character. So he was a faster character to use. Cammy was kind of a Chun-Li clone without being a Chun-Li clone, if that makes any sense. She has
improved a lot since then, though.
Yeah,
Cammy,
absolutely.
Yeah, but Cammy's become like very like popular character to use. So
and DJ was kind of like what they wanted to do with Balrog, where like he had the punching going, but also like he could do kicks. And T-Hawk was just a beast. He was a big dude who he did like this diving headbutt thing. That was really good as far as special moves. But yeah, this is one of those, like, this is how you improve on the original. You add a few characters, get some new, levels in there. And then also, for the Super Nintendo version, I think for Super Street Fighter 2, I think the music improved. I think the sound effects got better. The graphics slightly got better. It's not like anything you're going to notice right away, but if you're looking at screenshots right next to each other, you do notice the difference. There's definitely a finer fidelity there, a little more detail. And, it's still Street Fighter. You're still going to have fun. If you enjoyed the first one, you're going to enjoy this one.
Yes. So, yep, definitely. This is arguably I feel at least like the best version of the best version of like classic Street Fighter 2 that you can play. Because I said before, the Street Fighter 2 series games kind of came in like three rough groupings. You've got the original, Alpha, and X. So as far as the original grouping goes, I think this is the final and the best like incarnation of that. So, but yeah, I agree with you. This is a very fun game, and just kind of unfortunate. Like Street Fighter 2, the original game is what I played the most of back then. I just didn't have experience with like later games. Later games are better. So, but hey, it is what it is. When you go to the wells many times as Capcom did Street Fighter 2, I mean,
right.
It happens, right?
Exactly.
But so. Various all these games are loaded with like cheats, codes, secrets, etc. Street Fighter 2, Super Street Fighter 2. Sorry, you do have like you can choose the same character again. You can easily like there's a way to like cheat the game to easily get to M Bison. There's hidden artwork available in the game, different color outfits. You can control configuration is available again. Battles can be made faster as well, so in this game as well, if you want to. And again, character profiles are still here as well too. So finally, the last game to get ported to Super NES, and like I said before, kind of a late one, 1996. Probably a game nobody was expecting. Was Street Fighter 2 Alpha. Sorry, Street Fighter Alpha 2. See what I mean about these names, but it gets messy. So, the Alpha games were the second group of Street Fighter 2 games that Capcom did starting in 1995. So this is the original game. It was called Warrior's Dreams,
Yep.
which was heavily inspired by some stuff that they had first put in Street Fighter 2, the animated movie. So you probably could explain the differences with Alpha better than I could, Joe, but I'll take a stab at it. Alpha expands on the super combo system. Improves it. There's 3 levels to the 3 levels that are available for it now. So you can store up and use them with like output counters and chain counters and that kind of stuff. It also they also focus more on the story in this one, trying to do the character development, that kind of stuff. There's 10 immediately playable characters, 3 unlockable fighters. The also available is the Aiden from the original Street Fighter and Guy from Final Fight as well too.
Yes.
So. And then Alpha 2, the sequel, improves upon that with like new stages, music, like an ending. It discards the chain combo system, which wasn't which from my understanding was not a huge success. Right. They have the custom combo system, 13 characters, 5 characters, like also added, and then finally Street Fighter Alpha 3 came out in 1998. After Street Fighter 3, curiously enough, so surprise, surprise, but I guess Street Fighter 3 was such a disaster that Capcom decided to go back to the well for like the more tried and true game. So, which again, same improvements, like new stages, new characters, that kind of stuff. So, so Street Fighter Alpha 2 got also you ported to Super NES, and I was pleasantly surprised by this because I've really not played the Alpha game very much. I think I played Alpha 3 a little bit like the arcade, but I really didn't spend any time with the Alpha games. So Alpha 2 is a fun game. I think that I think Alpha 2 may be my favorite as far as the 4 Super NES games go, because it's like I'm not a big fan about the graphics in this one. I don't like the more cartoonish look of the Alpha Alpha games compared to compared to the more like anime style that the original games had, but the gameplay's solid though. The combo system's nice. I really do like the improvements they made to that, and the game feel is more balanced and fair, especially for like a newbie player. So
yes, so the Alpha 2 game, and really the Alpha series in general, kind of gets looked down upon because of the fact that they are easier than the mainline Street Fighter games and are considered, a button masher's dream. And I can see it, you know what I mean? There's definitely, stark differences between what would be the mainline Street Fighter series versus the Alpha series. But the Alpha series is just that. In Japan, this is called the Zero series. It's because it comes before Street Fighter and Street Fighter 2 and Street Fighter 3 and all that. So it's telling you the story, like Ken and Ryu are just separating from their sensei and their teachings. And Ryu hasn't had that epic battle with Sagat yet. That actually is covered in Street Fighter Alpha. So by the time you get to Street Fighter Alpha 2, that epic battle between Ryu and Sagat to see who is the official World Warrior champion has already happened, and Ryu has won that tournament. I like the story aspect of this. It's
I do too.
It's still, there's a tournament, you're fighting whatever, but the whole time, and you don't know it the first time around, but Akuma is in the shadows and he is the final boss. And that is one thing I will say about this game. Wow. Okay. So if you play on easiest on this game, it is the easiest. The computer player barely moves. You can definitely figure out whatever moves you want to do. To me, that, 1 star, that is practice mode. But even on the hardest difficulty, this game is a breeze up until you get to that fight with Shin Akuma. When you get to Shin Akuma, he literally is whatever setting you set. If you set it on the hardest mode, I had him beat me in 10 seconds. It was ridiculous because I was I was blowing through the game on normal, and I was not expecting that. Because, like I said, I've had experience with the Saturn version, and the Saturn version almost literally is beat for beat a straight port of the arcade. There's a few frames of animation missing. That's really the only thing that's missing. But like the difficulty, everything is like right there on par. And like I was not expecting the game to be as easy as it was. And then on top of it, like Shin Akuma to just come out swinging for the fences as hard as he could, because I had it set on the hardest. I mean, that's what I expected from the first fight. But they literally was a breeze up until you get up to Shinakuma, and then Shinakuma's like, "Oh, you're playing on the hardest? Well, here we go."
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, I agree with that 100%. And like, you know, since I'm not very good at fighting games, I did appreciate the fact that so I did appreciate the fact that this game was easier. So,
yeah, it's understandable.
But you know, I understand people having like, you know, yeah, the Alpha series. I've not heard like the Alpha series does seem like it's very controversial with the fans. So
yeah, Alpha 3 is generally kind of accepted as the better game, but not. So this is the one that everybody plays and loves.
Yes.
3 kind of got a little better as far as like the animations, the backgrounds, the complexity of it, but it took something away, and it's not explainable. It's something that you have to play to really feel it, to kind of understand like how different the games are. And the best way I can explain it would probably is with Street Fighter Alpha 3, in my opinion. I feel like it was slowed down just a tad bit, and it was enough to where it kind of felt like the original games, which is kind of what they were not going for originally.
Yeah, Alpha 3 got ported to the Dreamcast and PlayStation, right?
Yes, so the PlayStation port is the Dreamcast port is much better, but in both of those situations, they're slower than the arcade. They are missing frames of animation. Like the 30th anniversary of Street Fighter was really the first time that we had a good port of Street Fighter.
There's also a PSP version as well too, which I guess is kind of hard to find these days.
Yeah, but even that one, that was like more or less an upgraded version from like the Dreamcast. Like it was still like, you know, they didn't really do much with it, in my opinion. No. I had that game as well. So
okay, all right. So, but yeah, so it's like it's really impressive to see how well the game runs on Super NES too, because like, you know, this is because like, you know, I'm sure those graphical engines, the graphical engine being used and all the extra characters and combos and whatnot is really pushing the system hard. But it's like, you know, the game, all four of these games, you know, say what you will about them, Capcom programmed all four of these games extremely well for Super NES. It's like, you know, all four games have very little slowdown, very little flicker. You know, they're all very good arcade ports. So it's really just a programming, programming the system, like at its finest.
So we can get into that. So Street Fighter Alpha 2, I actually have quite a few notes. One, I have to praise the graphics. If you look at screenshots of the Sega Saturn version of this game and put it up against the Super Nintendo version, there are very few differences that you can find, and one of the biggest ones is really the fidelity of the background. Other than that, like, most of the animations are there, most of the backgrounds are there, just not as detailed, and same with the fighters. Like, the fighters aren't obviously as detailed, and that's just the limitations of the 32 meg cart that they used.
Sure.
And, you know, this game, as well as one other game, used the SDD1 chip, which helped with compression. So the first game to use it was Star Ocean, which I'm sure we will eventually talk about one day because there are now English.
I think we did cover it on the podcast already.
Oh, okay. So. Well, then we won't cover it. Whatever. Go back and listen to that episode. And then there was this game. And for many, many years, a lot of people thought that it was the SDD1 chip that was causing the game to have loading, which was interesting because there was loading on a cartridge. But come to find out, it's something with the way the actual, I can't remember the name of the chip now, but the actual, like, Nintendo chip, I think it's the SPC chip, that's on every Super Nintendo cart. It was that chip in general was too slow to be able to produce and like cache up the memory for the music and sound effects as well as the graphics. So the game actually loads the information for, the characters first and the backgrounds. So that's all there, and then you get a pause and it pauses, and then information is fed to the SPC chip as far as music and sound effects goes. And then the game continues and you have your fight and your music starts. But there are some limitations where there are a few times where, you'll be fighting and the music will cut out or a sound effect will cut out because, this game shouldn't have been running on a Super Nintendo. This little cart is a miracle, and it is, yeah. It is crazy when you dig into, I encourage anybody to go look, what is his name? MVG, Modern Vintage Gamer. His YouTube, he actually does a breakdown of the port of this game. And he actually looks at the Super Famicom edition, but there's no difference. It's the same game. And that's actually where I got the information about the SPC chip. Because he breaks down how for years they couldn't emulate this game. This game only first became fully workable in an emulation scenario in 2013, and that boggles my mind. And and this is why it took me forever to realize there was a Super Nintendo version, because yes, I was able to get SNES X9 back in 1999 2000 and play some Super Nintendo games, but this was never included in a ROM pack because apparently it just didn't run. So that was pretty interesting. Let's see. What are some of the other things that I wanted to mention?
So I saw some of those issues playing the game by emulation, but I just didn't see them as much as you did. Apparently, maybe just because you have a better setup. But so I'm not sure.
So a lot of the ROMs that you get today are patched, and they're patched so that you don't have those issues.
Got it.
So if you can find, which is going to be hard, but if you can find an original ROM, which I did not have, I actually had to watch a video of someone playing the original Super Nintendo game so that I could see the different glitches and things that the game was doing on the fly. Because my version also, and my version that I have, eliminated all the loading. I never saw any loading. There was no stutter in the music. There was no stutter in the sound effects. They've done an amazing job. Also, Akuma was already unlocked. So I didn't have to go through that whole code thing. So, I mean, today you can play this game and it's amazing. And because of that, we'll get into pricing and whatever else for these games and whatever else, but I would not tell you to go get a cartridge of this game because of the flaws. And it's not a lot, but it's enough. That loading, it's a few seconds, but it's on a cartridge. That's the thing with cartridges. This is not supposed to be loading. And then on top of that, you occasionally have the music cut out or sound effect cut out, which was really weird. Again, things I didn't expect to see on a cartridge. But that being said, after seeing side-by-side images of the Sega Saturn version that I essentially grew up playing versus screenshots of the Super Nintendo version, and literally they are almost identical except for a few fine details.
Yes.
And obviously, and that's the other thing too. A lot of the modern ROMs for this game take the CD music from the Saturn version and use it in the ROM for the Super Nintendo version, so you get much better sound than you would have had originally. But that,
not the original sound is bad, but,
right.
But,
so that's what I wanted to get at, is that the music doesn't sound bad at all, and this is a 32 megabyte cart, and that is important because of the fact that this is as impressive as a 320 megabyte CD-ROM. Like, it's 100 times more data, and yet they're almost identical. Like, there's very few things that you can see. Like, you have to be, like I said, screenshots next to each other, and you have to be, like, really looking. If you were to do, like, a quick glance, you wouldn't even notice the difference. You wouldn't know what you were playing.
Yeah, definitely like a programming masterpiece.
Yeah,
so,
this is crazy. Like, I still, like, even after watching MVG's video and understanding how he broke it down and how they were able to program this thing and everything else, I still cannot sit there and believe. I've seen the cart. I've seen the cart. I know it exists, but I still cannot believe that this thing existed on the Super Nintendo. And I think,
well, the cart didn't sell very well according to sales figures that I have. Probably because probably because it was such a late Super NES game.
I think it's twofold. So I don't have proof of this, but my assumption is with the SDD1 chip, this was probably one of those $90 Super Nintendo games.
Could have been. Yeah, I couldn't find anything for how much it sold for back in the day.
That right there is going to be a barrier, of entry. For one, especially when you have both the Saturn and the PlayStation out at that time, and this game was released on both of those systems.
Correct. Yep.
So, I see why they did it. And, there was an interview with the creator, and he said that, his goal was to make sure that this port could be played by everybody. And I commend him for that because he did a hell of a job. But with the competition being what it is, and, back then, PlayStation, Sega Saturn games, you're looking at $50 at the most. They really didn't push past that. And carts were still, up there. I think Legend of Zelda was, almost $90 when it came out, if I remember correctly.
Wasn't that bad, but yeah, it was expensive.
Yeah. So, and they only got worse with the N64, but that's a totally different story.
Right. Well, yeah, because sadly, it almost looks like the sales figures didn't justify the effort that Capcom put to programming this game for the Super NES anyway. Yeah. But it's because what I found online indicates that indicates worldwide the Super NES version of this game owns it up for 78,000 copies. So not a very big seller, right. Which is why this game is kind of pricey to find these days.
Right.
But,
that makes sense.
But still very impressive. And there are a couple other cart games I have seen that have loading. It's not just this game. Just like sometimes the game's trying to package so much on the console that there's no choice but to have loading. So.
Yeah, like I said, this was the first time I had noticed it on a cartridge, but there could be other games out there. We've talked about how I haven't played too much on the Super Nintendo, so hence why we do this podcast.
I mean, it wasn't a Super NES games. There was one game on the N64 that I remember that had loading. I think that was an NES game I had that played back in the day that had some definite brief loading on it too. So, but yeah, so it did happen. But this game is loaded with cheats, codes, and secrets. So I'm not even going to bother trying to go through all of them here. I'll just hit the highlights. There's ways to play championship versions, like many characters, classic versions of many characters, special versions like many characters. There's an evil Ryu in here. Yes. There's code to get you alternate costumes, extra colors, add in the Australia stage, or Flag of the Grass stage. Bonus stages are here. Versus same person versus mode again. Backgrounds can be changed because of to your choice, like a password. What else? Alternate survival mode. Choose a victory pose. Original combat moves in some areas. Evil Ryu, by the way, is only present in the newest version of the game. So, just a ton of things, tons of things to find in this game. It's like all Street Fighter games are loaded with cheats and codes and secrets, but this one really packed up to the gills with it. So, So yeah, I think just like comparing Alpha to the original games, I personally prefer the Alpha game. I'll spend more time with the Alpha games because they are easier. I understand somebody who's a better Street Fighter than I am, like you, Joe, probably wouldn't like this as much. But and like I said before, I'm not a big fan of the graphics. I don't like the cartoonish look that they gave these graphics compared to the more, I much prefer I much prefer the clean, sharp anime. Sorry, not anime, like watercolor, I guess you could say, drawing look at the original games. But that said, the game's easier, plays faster. Good selection of characters and combos and whatnot. So, this was a pleasant surprise. I think it's like this is probably what the Street Fighter series should have been with to start with. But it's like, as you mentioned before, this was fairly uncharted territory.
Yeah.
This series, Mortal Kombat, were trying to were really pioneers and revolutionaries in many ways, and it took time for people to figure out what worked and what didn't work.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
So when you get a game like when you get like a polished modern fighting game like Dead or Alive 5 or like there's a new what's that series? There's a new fighting game that got announced recently too. I can't think of the name of it like right now. But anyway, modern games have learned from the experience and history of all the games that came before them. So you'd be thankful about that. So do the games hold up today? It depends. Like I said before, the Street Fighter 2 games are rough to go back to because they're kind of slow and limited. Not the fault of the games themselves, just because, like I said before, the and as we were talking about, the games have evolved so much since then. But they're still fun. They're just not they're just more limited compared to what you're used to do to today. Alpha 2, I think, holds up pretty well still for the most part. I mean, there are flaws and there's things missing, as you mentioned, Joe. But it does seem, I definitely had the most fun, playing this game compared to the other ones.
Yeah. So in my opinion, Street Fighter 2, World Warrior, and technically Turbo Hyper Fighting, I think you can skip. That's just my opinion. Super Street Fighter 2 has all that and then some. So if you're going to go back, that should be your Street Fighter 2 experience, is Super Street Fighter 2. And then, Street Fighter Alpha 2, I definitely say, check it out through emulation, because the price of the card is ridiculous. But also, like, if you happen to have a modded Saturn, definitely try to burn a copy of that, because the, Saturn version is, like I said, like literally almost arcade perfect, and the Super NES version's close, but the 32 bits, you can't compete with that.
Yeah, the Saturn version must suffer like longer load time though, right?
So no, because I guess there's enough RAM on the Sega Saturn. There's barely any loading in that game. That's what's so nice about it. Yeah.
Because there's some Saturn games that seem which have like terrible load times.
There's definitely some really bad load times for some of them. And there's some games that even only released in Japan and needed a RAM update card to be able to run. Like Street Fighter Alpha 3 is one of those. It requires a 4 meg card. Yeah. So like it's sad because I burned like over 200 Sega Saturn games the minute I was able to mod my Saturn. And a lot of those Japanese games require not only the 4 meg card, but they require special 4 meg cards, because some of those games, like King of Fighters, for example, on the disc, you have all the information for the characters, the fighting, and how the game works. But all the assets, backgrounds, music, sound effects, all that is on the RAM card. So, form of copy protection, and a very good one at that.
Yeah. No, I remember like back in the day, Working Designs used to sell like a special a memory backup card. Like their games.
I was gonna say there's at least 2 of their games for the Saturn that I know require the 4 meg card.
But Sega threatened a lawsuit with them, like them doing that, so they had to stop. So, which unfortunate, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean it's Sega.
Yeah, well,
To be fair, as much as a Sega fan as I am, and I did love my Saturn, like, the writing was on the wall on the Saturn that, Sega wasn't probably going to last too long. And then the failure of the Dreamcast did not help that. So, it is what it is.
yeah, Sega just made too many mistakes about the system. Unfortunately, but those topics have been talked about. About like to death,
and we're Super Nintendo, so it doesn't matter.
But finishing that up like Robin thought, the Super NES, Saturn, and PlayStation version of this game, Alpha 2, all came out. They all came roughly at the same time in '96. Right. So that's so the fact that Super NES was still getting a game this good that late in its lifespan, is very impressive because '97 saw the last major first party releases for the system. '98 was the last game period. So
right.
This is toward the tail end of the system. So the very fact they even tried to put this game in the system is impressive.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, like, wasn't the 64 released in '96 or was that '97?
I think it was Japan in '96. Let me look that up real quick. But let's see. Yes, it was. No, I'm sorry. It was Japan, North America '96. Europe got '97.
Okay, so think about that. This game was released the same year that the N64 was released.
Yes.
There's probably some people who upgraded, but that's the other thing. Now that I think about it, that's the other thing that's crazy. Why wasn't Street Fighter Alpha 2 a launch title for the N64? Like, what happened there?
Yeah, they didn't. They didn't make any Street Fighter games for that system, did they?
No, the closest thing that I think Capcom made for the N64 was Mega Man 64, which was basically Mega Man Legends, and they did Resident Evil 1 and 2. I think that's literally all they had. I can't think of any other Capcom games, and I'm sure someone will correct me on that, but I'm just saying.
Yeah.
At Joe Sucks on Twitter, you can tweet me and correct me, but I'm just saying. I'm pretty sure those are like the 3 games.
Yeah, I'm trying to think myself, and I think you may be right. I'm trying to think about what came out for the system by them, and you may be right about that. There's limitations of the card, I guess, but...
sorry.
But yeah, anyway.
Sorry. Here we go. They released Resident Evil 2, Dino Crisis 2, Mega Man Legends, and Magical Tetris Challenge.
Was that Japan only, or was that?
Nope, that was a North American release as well. But 4 games.
Never even heard of that one. Interesting. Okay.
That's like I expected more or less confirmation, but I was not expecting that. It was just wow. Like I don't even. That's crazy.
Yes, indeed. So, but anyway.
Apparently, sorry, Dino Crisis 2 was not released here in the U.S.
Okay. So, I did hear about that, but Resident Evil 2 on the 64 is also a program masterpiece, by the way.
Yes,
it's very impressive.
Yes, agreed.
Because I played that back in the day. And
it's not a fun port, though.
Like, holy. I mean, it's perfectly fine. That's all you have. That's all you have. I mean, like they even got cutscenes like in that version, which is super impressive. I mean, I played it back in the day, but I had fun with it. But it was super. It was certainly the case of like really impressive that they got it onto a cart kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree with that.
Speaking about carts, did you ever play like any of the handheld versions of Street Fighter? The Game Boy or GBA versions?
I played the GBA version of Street Fighter Alpha 3. Which, you know what, for a Game Boy Advance port, was actually pretty decent. It's not great, but there's 4 buttons to work with. So you have some like you have the whole day to do like a fierce attack or whatever, but you can modify those controls, and I do that every single time I boot up a Street Fighter game. I set the low kick and low punch for like buttons I'm not even going to use, and it's always I work with the medium and the fierce. So once you change those controls and you got I use my mediums as my bumpers left and right, and then my high high kick and low kick, high kick and high punch are my face buttons. It's a much better experience.
Sure.
But yeah, that was really the only one that I played. I did hear that they released I think it was Super Street Fighter 2. They released on the Game Boy Advance. And I do know they made a GBA version of Alpha 2, I think. I'm not 100% sure. I think it was Alpha 2. But yeah, no experience with for the most part. No experience.
Yeah, handheld versions of fighting games are tough anyway because you're trying to, the limited buttons and screen size to work with can really cramp things out. But I heard they're playable. So, anyway, so yeah, so best estimates. So the best estimates are are that Capcom from Street Fighter 2 alone earned $10 billion in profits. So if you just factor in, according to most sites online, Street Fighter is the third most highest grossing franchise, period, in history. So behind Pac-Man and I think it was Final Fantasy. I don't have this in front of me right now. So. Capcom's earned a lot of money from this series over the years. So
there's a reason Street Fighter 6 is coming out next year. It's crazy.
But I mean, compared to the days of Street Fighter 2 when they're rushing out a new game every 6 months, it seems like. They have kind of backed off and taken a more gradual, slow approach to other games in the franchise because Street Fighter 3 came out in '97, right after the heels of Street Fighter 2 games. But the Street Fighter 4 didn't come out until 2008, 11 years later, and Street Fighter 5 didn't come out until 2016, 8 years after that.
Yeah, well, so they screwed the franchise with Street Fighter 3.
Yeah, it didn't help very much 4 either. So.
Right. So they alienated quite a bit of the fan base, and then they were focusing on the EX series where they were trying to go 3D. And those games...
Plus the crossovers.
Right, and those games aren't bad. But yeah, they were focusing on the crossovers because Street Fighter versus X-Men, Marvel vs. Capcom 1 and 2 were bringing in the money. Yes. I mean... I saw the death of arcades, and it was sad. But I'll tell you one thing, that my mall, up until probably about, I want to say 5 years ago, it was the year before we had that bad flood in Rhode Island. The Warwick Mall still had a Marvel vs. Capcom arcade machine in the mall. So, nice. I mean, that is a testament. Right there. They closed down the arcade, Toy Vault took over that space, but they still had that arcade machine. So, there you go. Yeah,
I don't think Dave & Buster's ever got a Street Fighter 5 machine, curiously enough, but I don't remember ever seeing one in there.
Yeah, they haven't. That's one of those, you gotta go to free play for.
Well, I have seen pictures. It's a huge machine, so maybe that's one reason for it.
That could be. I mean, I love playing Street Fighter in the arcade. There's no better experience.
Yeah, in Japan, there's some really oddity Street Fighter machines as well too. For example, Japan has a whack-a-mole Street Fighter 2 arcade game. So I mean, that's just
it's Japan, man. It's they are just a totally different beast.
Yeah,
we had there was a round one that was based in Taunton, Massachusetts, which is only 20 minutes from me. So we had gone there once, and they're basically based on the Japanese arcade parlors. So you walk in, and it's literally 9 rows deep, probably 10 machines across. So about 90 machines right there. And it's all different fighting games.
Nice.
And it's they're sit down. They got the arcade stick you would expect to see, but that you can sit down and play. And they're all connected to the internet. So you had, you could play someone in the facility, but there was more likely a chance of you connecting with someone else in some other country or somewhere else in the country, which was pretty cool.
Right. Also, real quick, So let me make a correction before somebody calls me out on this. Before we move on, Street Fighter V did not get an arcade release. That was that was a PC and PS4 game only.
Yeah. Okay.
So Street Fighter 4 was the last one actually. Was the last one in the franchise that came out like in arcades.
Right.
So
That makes sense.
Because arcades slowly die, and like Jordy pointed out. So, yeah. So that's yeah. That's the Street Fighter games that came on Super NES, like in a nutshell. So, fun to go back. Definitely fun to play again. So, last thing to go over is pricing. Most of these games can be had for relatively cheap, because they were like very popular. I also want to say on here it was very difficult because of all the different name systems being used on the consoles and whatnot to be able to get accurate, concise numbers without going nuts. So I'm giving best ballpark figures on this, but they should be correct now for the purposes like this podcast. So I do want to apologize. I usually try. I usually try to strive for a little bit more accuracy, but it was so hard to do in this case because it's like there's like 30. I don't even know how many Street Fighter games have come out, but
There's a lot.
It's a lot, and most have got home ports. So anyway. Street Fighter 2: The World Warrior on eBay, 18 copies listed currently. Time to research September 2022. 20 copies recently sold. All these prices include shipping, and they're all from North America. Joe, I guess you can blame the I guess you can blame the pandemic. The average price of the cart for this game now is starting from $10 to $30.
Wow.
So
yeah.
With CIB is averaging like $82. So
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I expect, complete in box is going to be a lot more expensive.
Yeah.
How many of us actually kept our, Super Nintendo boxes?
I did for a while, but they eventually got thrown out by accident. So,
Yeah.
But Street Fighter 2 Turbo Hyper Fighting is also common. 40 copies. Listed 30 copies recently sold. A little bit cheaper for this one, actually. Carts averaging anywhere from $11 to $22. CIB like anywhere from $43 to $87. Probably because this game's not as like sought after as the original game. So if I had to guess, new challengers get to be a little bit more expensive. 20 copies listed currently 13 copies recently sold. Carts anywhere from $24 to $30. CIB was around $60 for that. So. However, 2 is, as mentioned before, expensive because the game didn't sell very well. It's easy to find eBay. 31 copies were listed. 60 copies like recently sold. So you can find it. You just got to be prepared to pay for it. Like you actually want a physical copy of the cart because you're a collector, or whatever. Carts of this game selling prices ranging from $38 to $80.
Yeah.
And CIB $107 to $184.
So one was actually, it looks like it was posted today. There is a Street Fighter Alpha 2 with a beat up label.
Box?
Nope, it's a label. Little card only.
Okay.
A little faded. But they're doing a buy it now of $28.70. So that's actually
That's a steal.
That's a steal. If I had a physical Super Nintendo, I would actually not be talking about this and just buying it. But yeah, so there's still deals out there, but generally this game is quite expensive.
I mean, as far as Super NES goes, it's not that bad, but it definitely is. Definitely the most expensive, expensive Street Fighter games goes in the system. So. Because we've covered numerous games in this podcast with the average car price sells more than like $50.
Yeah.
So, but
And I don't think I need to mention it to our listeners, but if you see Street Fighter 2 in a red cart, that's a repro. The only games that had red carts, I believe, were Maximum Carnage and Doom.
I want to say you're correct. Yes, I think there was there were some games that released in black carts, but as far as red goes, yeah, you're right. Which I think I don't remember which ones came out in black carts. Off the top of my head.
Killer Instinct, I can tell you that.
Killer Instinct did. Yep. Okay. Yep. Maybe one of the Mortal Kombats.
The only I just looked up black carts for the Super Nintendo. The only ones I am seeing that are legit is Killer Instinct. That's it.
Okay, that makes sense.
I did see
I stand corrected then.
repros that are in Mortal Kombat and whatnot, but yeah, as far as legit carts, Killer Instinct was the only one that had the black. Oh man, that game. Have you discussed that game?
Killer Instinct?
Yeah.
I want to say yes. The problem is that we I'll have to check.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you have as well, but like that game is.
The problem is that we've covered like 200 games over the course of like 8 years. It all comes like blur together after a while at this point. So it's like, and I'm not so I'm not the biggest fighting fan either. So it's like, if it was an RPG, I'd be more likely to remember.
Right.
Anyway, this is a fun trip, like your fun trip down memory lane. We'll have to do this. So we'll have to do the same treatment, just like the Mortal Kombat games later on down the road, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, episode 137 was Killer Instinct.
Okay, I was gonna say, but Killer Instinct 2 came on the system too, right? Didn't it?
Nope, N64.
Nope. N64.
Yep.
Okay.
As Killer Instinct Gold, they didn't even want to name it Killer Instinct 2. They just went Killer Instinct Gold. But yeah. And like that game's fun for what it is, but I prefer the original. Like I have so many fond memories of going to my friend's house and playing Killer Instinct. It's not even funny. Like you would think that I owned a Super Nintendo and had that game because I memorized I love that game so much that I got my mom to buy me the Game Boy port. Let me tell you, that game, playing it now is horrible. But like, I also had the Street Fighter 2 port, and I also had the Mortal Kombat port. So, like, I was used to crappy ports. I didn't know any better then. Going back and playing them now, like, I can't play them. Like, they just move too slow and whatever else. But, like, at the time, like, that's all I had. So, for on-the-go gaming, right.
Yeah, like I said before, fighting games and handhelds like really struggle, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I mean, it was fun. You know what I mean? And it's one of those games that, like, I have very fond memories of. So I just had to get that out there. Now we can wrap it up.
We had a Killer Instinct. Yeah. No, we had a Killer Instinct Gold machine like for a semester, like in our limited college arcade.
Oh, God.
And that was a very fun game. So
I remember quick little. So they had Tilt in the Warwick Mall, and I
remember that
lasted
place. Yep.
for quite a while. And I remember we specifically went for, I think it was Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. I think that's what we had gone in there, prepared to play and enjoy. And we walked in, and like out of the corner of the arcade, you just heard combo breaker, and it was like super loud. Like the arcade owner knew what he was doing. Like, he had that thing cranked, and immediately we totally even forgot about whatever Mortal Kombat game we were playing or whatever it was that we were there for. Like, we huddled around probably another 25 people and watched like these two people just like kill each other in Killer Instinct. It was fantastic.
Alrighty, so thanks again as always for joining me,
Yes,
Joe. Thanks
absolutely.
Again, thanks to everybody out there for listening to the podcast as always. If you have any questions, comments, feedbacks, etc., you can leave them on our Facebook page. Also send me an email if you want to at the SNESpodcast@yahoo.com. Next time on the podcast, we're going to be covering a game I never heard of until I was flipping through some of the games available in the Switch Super NES collection recently. So there is a pretty unique action game. Looks like looks fun. So we're going to be covering that next time. Operation Logic Bomb, which is kind of like a combination of like Contra meets like more. I don't even know what to describe it for this point. Hopefully by the time we cover this, I'll have a better description. But it looks very unique. So we're going to be covering that next time around on the podcast. Quick warning. I'm in the process of getting ready to move, so it's very possible that the recording of the next episode may be delayed. If it is delayed, like it'll only be delayed by a week. So I'll post on Facebook if the recording of that episode is indeed delayed. So. Joe, you already mentioned where they can find you at, but do you mind just mentioning it again, real quick?
Yep. So I have a very public Facebook. You can always join me there. Definitely not family friendly. And you can find me on Twitter at JOESUX30, and feel free to drop me a line. I'm always available.
Sounds good. So everybody, thank you again for listening to us. As always, we appreciate your time. Take care, everybody. We'll catch you again next time. Later, all.
So you kidding?
Nintendo controls 80% of the video market. But no matter how you play the game, or which game you play, things definitely have come a long way since Pac-Man.
Now you're playing with power. Super power.